What does it mean to be Batman? What does that character really entail, and how does one go about depicting said character? Amidst all of his contemporaries, Batman has always stood out. Being the much darker in appearance, as well as in just overall tone, Batman as a character I think over time has easily been thrown left and right about how exactly to depict it. You look over the history of all of the different Batman films, live action or animated, and you can see there's quite the inconsistency in terms of tone. How serious do we make the character? How brutal do we make the character? Where does Batman and Bruce Wayne as a person draw the line morally? We've seen these different adaptations of Batman go all over the spectrum, both in horrible extremes like with George Clooney or Ben Affleck's version of the character. And then there's always that sweet middle ground where I would say Christian Bale's Batman and Robert Pattinson's definitely lies. And yesterday I went to see the Batman movie. I can say that without a doubt, this movie nailed what it truly means to be Batman. Now, I don't pretend to be High Top Films. That channel is absolutely incredible, especially when it comes to all things Batman, but I thought I'd throw in my 2 cents regarding why I love this movie so much. Now, of course, there will be spoilers for this video, so if you haven't seen the movie yet, I'd suggest clicking off and checking something else out on the channel. Now, before I get into the real meat of it regarding Batman's character, I do think the surrounding setting in which this Batman is set in is very important, as I think this movie really does nail the tone of Gotham in terms of how truly rotten and broken the city is, not in only terms of appearance and the way that they kind of nailed the tone of it, but even the political scene. They really went deep into what's really wrong with Gotham fundamentally, and I thought that's a huge part of what plays into what eventually Batman has to deal with. And so coupled with this, on top of the amazing fight scenes, it really did give me a huge reminiscing feeling of the Arkham games, and I mean, it'd be an understatement to say that the Arkham games are beloved. I also really did enjoy the direction that they took regarding Bruce Wayne's backstory and presenting it. Instead of having to give us this whole flashback, I think the people behind the movie understood that this is a backstory that we are very familiar with, and so instead this is something that's shown through pieces of dialogue, as this is a Batman that has now been Batman for at least 2 years. Even though the movie is 3 hours long, they didn't waste any time on a superhero origin story, how Batman becomes the Batman, him getting the suit, making the suit, the usual typical stuff that you see in every superhero movie, the whole origin phase, and instead they jumped right into him already being Batman, which not only saves a lot of time, but really allows for the movie to go fully into the actual character of Batman and what it really means to be Batman, instead of what I think a good amount of films have done to this point, and that's really hammer in on the death of Bruce Wayne's parents. What does it truly mean to be the Batman? What is the Batman meant to represent and symbolize? And we need to look at what the Batman symbolizes for Bruce Wayne, and then what the Batman symbolizes for the rest of Gotham. There was a video I saw recently by a YouTuber that I respect immensely, and if you haven't checked out his channel, you definitely should. The Closer Look, talking about a character arc and how Rey from Star Wars was a character that failed because the movie did not establish a good want versus need regarding a character's arc. The character's want is essentially where the movie starts, what the character desires, what their original goals and ambitions are, and their purpose for doing things. Their need is what the character has to realize in order to grow and actually make progress. And this movie nails it entirely with its opening and closing statements. Kind of like when you write an essay and you have your opening and then final things to say in order to bring it all together. This movie does it perfectly, and just from the opening statement alone while I was in the theaters, I knew that this movie was going to be great, because just from the beginning I could already tell what direction they were going to try to take with this Batman specifically. So what is this Batman's goal per se at the beginning of the film? What do his actions lead to? And well, the opening monologue goes like this. It's a bit of a long quote, but bear with me. Thursday, October 31st. The city streets are crowded for the holiday, even with the rain. Hidden in the chaos is the element waiting to strike like snakes. And I'm there too, watching. 2 years of nights have turned me into a nocturnal animal. I must choose my targets carefully. It's a big city. I can't be everywhere, but they don't know where I am. We have a signal now for when I'm needed. When that light hits the sky, it's not just a call. It's a warning to them. Fear is a tool. They think I'm hiding in the shadows, but I am the shadows. I wish I could say I'm making a difference, but I'm not. Murder, robberies, assault. 2 years later, they're all up. And now this. The city's eating itself. Maybe it can't be saved, but I have to try. Push myself. These nights all roll together in a rush, behind the mask. Sometimes in the morning I have to force myself to remember everything that happened. It's a lot cooler when Robert Pattinson says it, but I'm trying to avoid copyright, so hopefully that wasn't too bad. But you see, the opening statement there is essential, as Bruce compares himself to a nocturnal animal, and that's what he's become, and likening his own symbol up in the sky, the bat symbol, as a warning. He wants to inspire fear. And that's the real key point here. From this opening monologue, you could tell that this Batman, his motivation, his goal, his mentality is to strike the ever-living fear of God himself into the hearts of criminals to stop them from committing crime. But as he notices himself, that hasn't done anything. Everything has gotten worse. The crimes in which he's been trying to prevent have only gotten up. But yet he thinks the solution is to push himself even harder. That's this Batman's want at the beginning of a film. Even though he's 2 years in, this is still a relatively new Batman, who hasn't fully matured and understood his purpose and what he actually needs to be. So what he wants is to inspire fear. As he says himself, he's vengeance. And this is Bruce Wayne's way of... it's a really messed up way of him coping with the loss of his family and making sure that such atrocities never happen again. This movie understands the vital flaw with Batman and with Bruce at the beginning of being Batman. And I kind of love that the way Bruce Wayne is in the movie, where we get to see Bruce entering the same place Batman has, and the feel is quite incredible. Bruce is portrayed in this movie as a lot more socially awkward, if you will, him being as reserved as he is of a person. It makes sense, and I've seen some people point out that they wish they got to see a little bit more of the playboy aspect, but I think if there were future films to be out later on, I think that we would get to see Bruce mature a little more and understand that he himself needs to do more as well as Bruce Wayne. But at this certain moment, Bruce Wayne being the way he is, I think was extremely appropriate, and I loved it. And I think it goes on to further show that by being Batman, Bruce can truly be himself. What I mean by that is Bruce Wayne is the mask that Batman wears, not the other way around. The Riddler, who is the main antagonist of this movie, points it out as such. The Riddler wore his mask so he could truly be himself, and Bruce Wayne wears the mask of Batman to truly be who he is. A person who is deeply scarred and hurt by his past, and takes it out on the world through vengeance by inspiring fear in other criminals. That is who Bruce Wayne truly is, and that is what the Batman represents at the beginning of the movie, for Bruce Wayne and for the rest of Gotham. I also think having the Riddler being the first villain that this Batman goes up against if they plan on doing future movies was a brilliant choice, as it goes to show that Batman is not an unstoppable person. Even though physically he's much more dominant than the Riddler is, the Riddler's always been about intellect and just outwitting the Batman. And the whole detective thing that this movie went for, I really enjoyed it, as I think the detective side of Batman has been something that's kind of been swept under the rug behind all the action for a large majority of the movies. And so it's through this conflict that the Riddler will push Batman to have to conflict with the past of his own family and the rest of Gotham and what's truly been going on behind the scenes. And it's through this conflict that Batman begins to learn what he truly needs to be in order to actually make a change in this city. And something that I really want to point out here is this conflict is made even greater due to the way that Batman is presented with his own moral code. You see, despite this Batman being flawed and his want being imperfect, wanting to strike fear into criminals, he still holds the golden rule that is essential to Batman as a character, and that is Batman does not kill. And throughout this film, we get to see Batman prove that morality, especially when it comes to Catwoman and her desire for vengeance on Falcone. Because Batman, even in his early stage, has always understood the slippery slope that murdering a criminal would be as a hero. And so the film absolutely nailed this, understanding that our Batman is flawed, but still has that very central moral code that makes him Batman and adds even more conflict to his character. I think a very important scene is when Alfred winds up in the hospital after a failed assassination attempt, and we see Bruce open up about the fact that he thought he had gotten over all of his fears, but now realizes that he still fears losing the people he cares about still. And I thought that was a beautiful moment, not only because it deepens the bonds and the father-son relationship that Alfred and Bruce really do have, but it also shows why Bruce does what he does, despite him not truly knowing it through the beginning half of that film. So that's what we have. Through all the conflicts, through all of the different riddles that he's had to solve, the different murders that have been going on, the uprising of chaos, we have a Batman who wants to inspire fear into other people, has to still come in terms with his own fears that he actually still has, and then comes the moment near the end half of the film where Batman realizes what he needs to be. And this moment finally happens when he's face to face to the Riddler, and the Riddler essentially tells him that he was inspired by the Batman, and the Batman denying that he had any sort of influence, not willing to come to terms with that reality and the effects of his actions. And after nearly beating a criminal into a coma, the criminal looks up after he's asked who he is, and he says the words, "I'm vengeance." This is where Batman realizes that his actions and only inspiring fear into criminals wasn't the right approach. Instead, he needs to be more than that. He can't just be the shadows that terrifies criminals into hiding, but he needs to be more. He needs to be a leader to the people. Something that I thought was beautifully symbolized when he goes down from fighting the criminals and lights up a flare and reaches out his hand to guide the people out of the ruins. Throughout this film, a lot happens. And I mean a lot. It is a tense 3 hours. But it's through those 3 hours of conflict, we see the Batman learn more and more about this city that he's trying to fix, and what's truly wrong with it, and more importantly, what he's been doing wrong the whole time. There's a specific portion that I want to take from the end dialogue, and it says, "Vengeance won't change the past, mine or anyone else's. People need hope." That was the character's need. Batman needed to learn that inspiring fear into the heart of the criminals wasn't going to bring about the change that he wanted, but if not, it was also inspiring hope to the good people of Gotham, to bring about real change. And so they truly nailed the character arc of the Batman. This young Batman learning what it truly means to be a hero, to go above and beyond for the city of Gotham, and what it will all entail, as I think his solitude and the loneliness that will come with the road that he has taken is something that he's starting to realize throughout the film, especially as you see with his relationship with Catwoman. Being Batman and the pain of solitude is something that you see ever present on this version of Bruce Wayne, and I love it. But it's understanding that he needs to be more, that this film nailed perfectly. Something that I think would have been a character arc that other films might have tried to do in 2, 3 movies, which isn't anything wrong, but for this film to do it all in one was incredibly impressive. And for me, this film absolutely perfected what it means to be Batman, or at least in my mind is the perfect adaptation of what it means to be the Batman. Hopefully you enjoyed this video, and if you are new to the channel, make sure you like, comment, subscribe, and turn on the bell notifications. That way you're notified whenever a new video pops up on some of your favorite anime, manga, or whatever content. As always, this has been The Masked Man. Hope everyone has a blessed rest of the day, and peace.